morning. Years ago, I remember seeing a performer, Larry Norman, in concert. He came out of that Jesus movement, Jesus Revolution, or whatever it was in the 70s, where people, our musicians, singers, bands, and others, hippies, out of the sex, drugs, and rock and roll protests and liberation kind of movements, were converted in a mass way into Christianity. And they brought their music and their rock and roll and their leather jackets and jeans and long hair and everything into this new scene. And they brought some of their music, not just the style, but the protest songs and lyrics alongside this newfound message of Jesus. And one of the songs that Larry Norman sang was The Great American Novel. And it was kind of a critique of the society in which he lived and grew up, a society where wealth and power and might were used over and against the poor and the weak, and there was this great divide, and he experienced that. But also the issues of white over black and this power imbalance and injustice. And even though he lived in that era of liberation where particularly women were part of all of that, his lyrics, I warn you, are still fairly masculine. But part of the song goes, I was born and raised an orphan in a land that once was free, in a land that poured its love out on the moon. And I grew up in the shadow of your silos filled with grain, but you never helped to fill my empty spoon. You killed a black man at midnight for just talking to your daughter. Then you made his wife your mistress, and you leave her without water. And your money says, in God we trust, but it's against the law to pray in school. You say we beat the Russians to the moon, but I say you starved your children to do it. You say all men are equal, all men are brothers, then why are the rich more equal than others? Don't ask me for the answers, I've only got one. The man leaves his darkness when he follows the sun. It's a song that really highlights that difference between rich and poor and powerful and weak. Where do we put our trust? And we're seeing those issues, not just the rich and the poor and the weak and the strong, but the racial tensions in America today, in all the sort of stuff that Trump's doing. We see this power imbalance, the worship of money and power in leadership across the world, in the dictators and the strong men, as they're called, who lead nations and worship at the footstool of power and money and dominate other people and create violence and chaos and suffering. But there's a line in that song, your money says in God we trust. And then it's against the law to pray in school, which I don't get. You've got your money, your currency has in God we trust printed on it, but you don't allow prayers in school. I get not forcing people to pray, but not allowing people to pray. But I wonder to myself, what does it mean to those who hold this currency that says in God we trust? Do they trust in this God, or do they more trust in the value of that piece of paper they're holding? Where do they put their trust? What does it mean to trust in God? What does it mean for any of us to trust in God? What do those words really mean and require of us? And this week is the beginning of the journey of Lent, which is really about that idea of trusting in God. What does it mean to trust in God? Lent helps us to sit and ponder and reflect and peel back the layers of our lives until we understand what is real and true at the depth of life and what it is we will trust ultimately. And in the first week of Lent, we read these stories of Jesus being tested, tried in the wilderness, tempted. This coming up against this adversary. And in Luke's story this year, it's kind of portrayed as a hero story, that Jesus is this hero of the story. And right at the start, he's in there against the adversary, being tempted, tried, tested. Will he prove faithful? Will he prove real? Is he one we can trust? And listen to the rest of his story. The wilderness, we're told, he's led into by the Spirit, is a place of raw, naked vulnerability of life. In the wilderness, we come up against our own powerlessness. Susan and I have ventured into various parts of this great continent, but in various parts of it, there is this raw, vulnerable wilderness, this rough place, rugged beauty. You go into the far west of New South Wales or Central Australia, or the top end with its rainforest, or the far northwest with its rugged coastline. We've journeyed usually by car or a bus or a boat, or kept safely to the paths and the tracks of a national park where we can find our way out. And we look beyond into the distance, into this vast distance of the red soil plains and deserts where there's spinifex and grasses and bushes and shrubs and small trees and rocks and rock formations, where there's creatures hidden in the earth and in the crevices, and a life that comes out when after rains in abundant ways. But it's a dangerous place. I know that if I was stuck out in that wilderness for any length of time, I don't have the resources to survive. I'd die. I stand in that wilderness place even from the safe distance in a short while, and I'm exposed to my own vulnerability. Out there, the toys we have, the resources, the things around us in life that help us control life and define it and keep ourselves safe and alive and well, just aren't there. And it's just us. And the wilderness is not just a physical place like this, but it can be a spiritual, emotional, psychological space. Over the last few weeks, I've had some of these experiences. My uncle was suddenly taken ill, and he was taken to hospital and diagnosed with extreme or serious cancer, and he died in a few weeks. Another colleague, a friend who I work with in one of the congregations, suddenly had an episode and lapsed into unconsciousness and died after a week. We've had a seriously ill dog over a couple of days. And in these experiences, you're drawn into a place where you realise your own powerlessness. You can't do anything to change or fix the situation. With my uncle, he felt seriously unwell. They took him, his wife, my aunt, took him to the doctor, the GP, who examined him and said, "This is beyond my capacity, take him to the hospital." They took him to the hospital, they did a series of tests, they held him, they comforted him, they took some of the pressure off his body, but said his extent of cancer is far more than we can deal with. You need to go to a specialist cancer centre. So they took him there and they examined him and said, "There's nothing we can do for him here," and referred him back to a palliative care unit where he could die well and comfortably, which is what happened. All these layers of trust, the doctor, the hospital, the specialist cancer centre, fell away. These resources were revealed to not have the capacity to be able to help him. He was too far progressed in his illness. How do we experience that helplessness, that powerlessness? We want to do something to make him well. We pray. What are our prayers filled with in that moment? That desperation, that yearning, that longing, that uncertainty. We pray that God might make him well, but it's more than that. What are our prayers filled with in that space when we recognise our own powerlessness? Ultimately, prayer in that space, I guess, is surrendering into this mystery of God's love, of allowing ourselves to just exist and be in the mystery and the wonder of God's love. And trusting and hoping that whatever happens, all will be well, that we will be okay. In our sadness, our grief, our loss. My uncle, moving beyond this life into whatever exists beyond, that realm we think about, we hope for, but we don't really understand. this place of God, to release him and trust that he's held in grace. It's this journey into powerlessness that Lent invites us into in this story of Jesus. He's in the wilderness and he's tempted by the tempter, the testing one, Diabolus, often called the Satan, who in the scriptures is often this like a prosecuting attorney who prosecutes the case against, who opens up all the questions, all the alternatives, all the possibilities, and offers us another way. And he offered Jesus these ways. The first was, you're hungry, Jesus, you've been fasting. Turn the stones into bread and you can eat. You'll be right. Jesus says, we don't live by bread alone, but by words that flow from God's mouth. It's a temptation to be relevant and real. And Jesus says, I will trust in God. This tempter takes him up to the top of a temple and says, dive off, jump off. And God will send angels and they'll come and they'll hold you up and be spectacular, Jesus. Show the world who you are. Prove yourself. Be spectacular. And we're tempted in that way too. Jesus says, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test. But we're tempted to be spectacular, magnificent, to show ourselves for all the glory we have and to strive for that glory and to be great. Only to find that we're no more magnificent than the next person. We're all human and we have good things in us, but there's other areas we fail and we just can't do. What does it mean to trust in God and not put God to the test? And then this tempter takes him up onto a high place and looks down across all the worlds, all the nations and in the world. If you bow down and worship me, all of this will be yours. You can do what you like with it. You can have all power over all these people and nations. And Jesus says, you'll worship the Lord your God alone and nothing else. You don't own these things. It's the temptation to be powerful. To be all-powerful, almighty. Isn't that what Trump's seeking? To be all-powerful. To be the king of America. To be the one and the only one who can make decisions and have all power. Isn't that what Putin has and in China, in North Korea, in other parts of the world? These people who rise up and want to be all-powerful. And we ourselves want to have power over our own lives, to control and define the course of our lives and the things around us, and to be in control. And it's when this control, when the resources and all those layers of control and definition and resource in our life are stripped away, we realise we're vulnerable and raw naked before life. And there's nothing we can do. Ultimately, we're powerless. And this story of Lent invites us to explore what it means to let go, to not pretend or believe that we have power, that we're in control, to let go and to trust in God. And what does it mean to trust in God? What does it mean to pray for those who are dying and to recognise we can't fix them, we can't heal them and cure them? And what does it mean for us to pray that God would hold them in infinite love and mercy and grace? What does it mean for us to release ourselves into this same infinite mercy and love? And to trust that God holds us, that whatever happens in life and death, nothing can separate us from God's love. This is the story and the message of Jesus, and this is what Jesus invites us into this week. To ask ourselves, what does it mean to trust God? To let go and to trust God with everything we have.